At the beginning of the COVID-19 lockdowns, I posted about the potential unintended consequences. I believed that we would see countless deaths of despair. Now, depression and suicide are already at all-time highs in this country, and pour the gasoline of isolation on top of that, and I believe the results would be catastrophic. And they have been. Today, we're talking about depression and suicide with a professional funny man. What? Now, why in the world would we be talking about such a serious topic with a comedian? When Robin Williams died on August 11, 2014, it literally kicked me in the chest. When I heard about the news on talk radio as I was driving south on E470 in Denver, I literally had to pull over. Robin Williams was my hero. As a young entertainer, I was inspired by Robin, and I vowed that day that I would share my story and talk about this subject. No one should ever have to die hopeless and alone. Our chat today is brought to you by StreamYard. Put the power of live streaming video to work for your business, your brand, or your cause. We're using StreamYard to deliver this program live right now. You can be a pro and stream live to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and more. Go to StreamYardCause.com to sign up for your free account. That's StreamYardCause.com. My guest today is a comedian and a writer for The Tonight Show for 20 years. He is also a suicide prevention speaker and trainer. Depression and suicide run in his family. He's thought about killing himself more times than he can even count. He's fought a lifetime battle with major depressive disorder and chronic suicidality, turning that long, dark journey of the soul into 5 TEDx Talks and sharing his life-saving insights on mental health awareness with associations, corporations, and colleges. He is the author of the book Guts, Grit, and the Grind, a mental mechanics manual, Basic Mechanics. Stay tuned because we're giving away the audiobook just for joining us today. He believes that where there is humor, there is hope. And where there is laughter, there is life. Nobody dies laughing. The right person at the right time with the right information can save a life. My guest today is Frank King. Frank, welcome aboard.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, no pressure there.
No pressure. I'm sure you've never heard that before, though. No. So we're talking in the pre-show, and I just want to thank Frank because his wife suffered from an injury, and at this hour right now, she's actually in surgery, but he's going to track her through the app and felt like he could still do the show. So we bumped it 2 hours and here we are. So how is Wendy doing?
Well, I think she's going into surgery in about 45 minutes. And, cause if there's some way I could scrub in for that surgery, I would be there and not here. But they said, Mr. King, I'm sorry with the COVID, you are not allowed to scrub in for the surgery. So go ahead and do the live stream.
Very good. Well, I'm glad the doctors gave you permission to be here. You're a good man for joining us on the program today. Well, let's get to know the man in front of the laughter a little bit before we talk about a very serious subject. How'd you become a comedian?
Oh, fourth grade, actually. I was supposed to wear glasses. My entire family is horribly nearsighted. And the joke I wrote years ago was we were descended from the people on the island of myopia. And it was conquered over and over because they never saw the bad guys coming. Myopia, of course, is nearsighted or short-sightedness. Back in the day, there were no fashion frames. We're talking, early 60s. Girls had cat eye glasses in a couple of colors. Guys had the basic Ray-Ban plastic Buddy Holly glasses, which, by the way, are very popular now. But at the time, so I didn't want to wear them. I was afraid of what my classmates would say, 4 eyes, so forth and so on. So Mrs. Dark, my fourth grade teacher, got me to the front of the room, had me turn away from the class, put my glasses on me, and turn me back to the class. Her idea being pull the Band-Aid off. Let everybody see Frank in his new glasses all at once. Let's get this over with. So when she turned me back to the class with my glasses on, She looks down and she goes, see, you look intelligent. And I looked up at her and said, yes, that would explain all the laughter. She excused herself to go to the teacher's lounge immediately. Years later, I bumped into her at the Winn-Dixie grocery store. She said, Frank, do you know why I excused myself to go to the teacher's lounge that morning? I said, no, Ms. Dark, I have no idea. She goes, that was the funniest thing a child had ever said to me before or since. I was afraid I would laugh in your face and break your heart. And and when the kids laughed in that class, that's when I was hooked. I decided I was going to be a stand-up comedian. High school, I did 3 years of drama class, never got a good part, never got a speaking part, always a member of the chorus. And by my second semester senior year, I'm thinking I see a pattern here. And I realized if I did stand-up, I could write, direct, produce, and star in my own little show every night. And just by chance, there was a senior talent show. Nobody had ever done stand-up. So I did my stand-up and I won. Went home and told my mama, I'm going to be a comedian. And she said, you are going to college first. I don't care what you do when you get done. You can be a goat herder when you're done. But you, my son, will be a goat herder with a degree. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill, graduated. And then my high school and college sweetheart and I got married and moved to San Diego, which by chance, just by chance, had a branch of the world famous Comedy Store, the one that's on Sunset. And though my first wife was not happy with it, I began to go to open mic nights. I tell people, if you want to be a comedian, go to 2 open mic nights, see how bad the other people are. About 75, 80% of them are horrible. It'll give you the nerve to get up. And sure enough, they were horrible. So I thought, I'm that funny walking around. So the third week I got up. I'm about halfway through my 5 minutes. And inside my head, I heard this, you're home. Second thing I thought was, I'm going to do this for a living. I have no idea how, but I'm going to do it for a living. A year later, won a contest, funniest person in San Diego. Asked my girlfriend, now my wife with the broken hip of 32 years, hey, I'm going on the road to do stand-up full time. Do you want to come along just for the ride? She said yes. So we packed everything into storage we couldn't fit into my tiny Dodge Colt and gave up our jobs, hit the road. We were on the road nonstop, no home for 2,629 nights in a row.
Wow.
7 years and change. Yeah. It was the beginning of the comedy boom. And back in the day, they used to put you up in a 3-bedroom condo, famously called the comedy condo. Had a cleaning service come in once a week and get it ready for the next group of comics. So I not only worked with Seinfeld and Dennis Miller and Rosie O'Donnell and Ellen DeGeneres and Paula Poundstone and Jeff Foxworthy and Ron White, I lived with them. We lived with them for weeks on end. It was just an amazing time to be alive and doing comedy. 93, got a call from a radio station in my old hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina. They needed a morning show host. There was a time when they were hiring comics to be morning show hosts on radio. This is before the clear channels of the world started buying stations on it. So I got the job on the #1 morning rock and roll radio show in Raleigh. And I drove that thing to number 6 in 18 months and got fired. One of my greatest accomplishments. I didn't just drive it into the ground, I drove it into Middle Earth. Afterwards, the comedy boom had busted, clubs were closing, but my act had always been very clean. So I thought, I'll be a corporate comedian. I'll do the rubber chicken circuit. I'll be funny after dinner and after lunch at the big awards banquets. So I did that till 2007 or 8, about the beginning of the last recession, not a sentence I thought I would ever utter, last recession. And then it all crashed and burned. The business dropped off for me about 80% overnight. We lost everything we'd worked for in 25 years in Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And that's when I found out what the barrel of my gun tasted like. Spoiler alert.
Tell us a little bit more about that, Frank. When I heard you first say that in a TED Talk, I had to think twice about what you're saying. So you had a tickle at the top of in the roof of your mouth.
I could only scratch with the front side on my nickel-plated 38. Yeah, and when I did the keynote, I say, spoiler alert, didn't pull the trigger. And I get a nervous laugh. And then I say, a friend of mine was in the audience a couple of months ago. He never heard me say that. He came up afterwards. He actually said this. Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I go, hey, man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed? The reason I didn't pull the trigger, it's in my first TEDx talk called A Matter of Laugh or Death. It's on YouTube. The reason I didn't pull the trigger was I had $1 million life insurance policy, but I wasn't sure how long I'd had it. And I knew my policy because I sold insurance right out of college. I knew the policy had a 2-year suicide clause. So I called up my insurance agent. And I said, hey, man, how long have I had that policy? He goes, I don't know. Let me check. He's checking. I can hear him clicking on the keys. He comes back on the phone. He goes, you've had it 22 months. And then he said, no, don't do it. Because he'd fielded a number of phone calls just like that. And in a number of cases, the policy was older than 24 months, older than 2 years. And he had delivered benefit checks to the widow or widower. And so I had to wait 2 months because I was not going to leave my wife both broke and brokenhearted. So I was literally worth more dead than alive at that point to my wife. I'm sure if you'd asked her at the time, do you want the money or do you want your husband? Hopefully she would have said, I want my husband.
Sure.
We'll never know. So the interesting thing I think, guys, is because of my chronic suicidal ideation, because I can do it anytime, because I live life in the exit row in the airplane next to the window seat, it allowed me to go on through those 2 months because I knew at 2 months and a day, I could end the pain. A lot of people don't understand with suicide. They say, why did so-and-so want to kill himself or herself? And I say that I bet you they did not want to kill themselves. I bet you they just wanted to end the pain.
I was listening to that particular TED Talk today on my walk, and you talked about when people have those suicidal ideations, they really have three choices. And you use the example of the car breaking down. Well, I can get the car fixed, I can get a new car, or I can kill myself. For those who don't deal with mental health issues, that sounds like just a whole different way of thinking. Help our viewers and listeners understand that frame of mind.
Well, that is chronic suicidal ideation to a T. For me and for my tribe, people like me who have mental illness and, say depression, thoughts of suicide. Suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And that's the example I give in my keynote. And it's oftentimes, I think every keynote I've given, except one, at least one person in the audience, sometimes more, have that condition. And they don't know it has a name. And they think they're just some kind of freak because of the way their brain works. And their relief is palpable. They come up after the show, I had some come up crying because I did a college show and a young woman came up and said, thank you for your keynote. I said, you're welcome. She goes, but it made me weep. I said, how did it make you weep? She said, well, the thing about your car, get it fixed, buy a new one, and you could just kill yourself. She said, I've been having those thoughts my entire life. I thought it was just me. I didn't know it had a name. I thought I was some kind of freak. And when I heard you say that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I was not alone. And I wept. It's sort of like mental muzak. When you go in a retail store and there's music playing.
Sure.
I tend not to notice the music unless it's a song I really like or really hate. And chronic suicidal ideation is like that. It's like DOS running under Windows. It's always there. It's always option C. I mean, it's not a serious option because I've had it for so long. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things that keeps me alive. Knowing that I could end it at any moment, knowing I could cross that barrier, I can withstand a great deal of mental anguish, pain, whatever, knowing that I can, if I choose, end it all. So a friend of mine who has chronic suicidal ideation said, if it weren't for my chronic suicidal ideation, I'd have killed myself a long time ago. But knowing I have an out, ironically, helps keep me alive.
If someone is struggling with mental health issues because of the lockdown, the anxiety of what's going on, or they've been dealing with it for years, but as you put it, you talked about, and we shared in the introduction, they haven't come out yet, right? It's something that's very personal for everyone, that they really want to be that vulnerable. And some people can't be that vulnerable and they just don't know what to do in terms of talking about it. So what do you say to the person who has those suicidal thoughts and ideations, but doesn't know what the first step to take is?
Well, as you might imagine, I get a goodly number of phone calls, texts, emails, Facebook messages, because I give out my cell phone number at all my keynotes for that reason. And this week, I've been doing a radio show, an hour of a radio show, terrestrial radio, in Iowa, Denison, Iowa, of all places, That's another story. But the program director had a friend who attempted suicide last Sunday. And he said, would you mind if I have him give you a call? And so he waited a week because men tend not to reach out for help. That's why we wrote the book, The Guts, Grit, and the Grind, a mental mechanics manual. It's a book on mental health, stories of men by men, specifically for men. So he waited a week, and he waited 5 days, and he called me. And he asked the question you just asked. He goes, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. And I said, well, first thing, you need to get evaluated. You need to see a mental health professional and find out, what is it that you are living with? Is it depression? Is it bipolar? Is it schizoaffective disorder? Is it, and then if you can nail it down, then you need to see a psychiatrist and see about getting some medication. And I said, step 3, if you get that far, is there's now a cheek swab DNA test. That what they do is they take a cheek swab DNA, swab test, and they try to match your DNA with the best psychotropic for your metabolism. So there's a lot less lab rat, go on, taper off, go on, taper off. So I would say first job is to get evaluated. And I said, look, does your company have an EAP, Employee Assistance Program? Yes. I said, well, if you're comfortable going to HR, tell them what you told me and you'd like the mental health services. If not, Google mental health services in your county, and you'll find some from like retail, you got great insurance, all the way down to we will charge you based on a sliding scale and your income. If you want to do it sort of anonymously so nobody at work will know. But take your pick. And I'll call them, by the way, Kaz, this afternoon to follow up. It's very important when you give advice like that to follow up a day or two later to let them know you care. You want to know how they're doing. So those are the first 3 steps I recommend: evaluation, medication, and then take the cheek swab DNA test so there's not so much experimentation.
There's obviously things to say and then things to avoid. What kinds of things should you avoid saying to someone who's having those thoughts?
Well, let's back up just a bit. Let's go upstream, as they say in the mental health business. How do you know if somebody is depressed? Well, eat too much, can't eat, sleep too much, can't sleep. Let their personal hygiene go. Has trouble getting out of bed in the morning, rallies in the afternoon. So what do you say to somebody like that? Here's what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Turn that frown upside down. Have you tried fish oil? Can't tell you how many times. Here's what you do say. I'm here for you and I mean it. I know you're not lazy, crazy, or self-absorbed. I know that mental illness is an illness. Depression is an illness. But good news is with time and treatment, things will get better, which is what I told the gentleman I spoke to earlier in the week. I will take the time. I'll help you get the treatment. And then you have to ask this question. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Just like that. There's no wives' tale. You should never mention the S word in front of somebody who is depressed because get this, it might give them the idea. Suicide, what a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? Trust me, it's crossed their mind. But let's say, cause they don't tell you they are suicidal, how would you know? Well, they talk about death and dying. It appears as a theme in their artwork, their music, their painting, writing. They're putting their personal affairs in order, including giving away prized possessions. So they want to make sure the prized possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they are gone. And here's a counterintuitive one that's very dangerous. They're depressed forever and all of a sudden happy for no apparent reason. And it's dangerous because you're happy. Oh my God, thank God he's happy. But the problem is the person may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is finite.
Are they happy because now they have a plan?
Yes, and they know it will end. So what do you say? Well, here's what you don't say to somebody you believe is depressed. You're being melodramatic. You're just looking for attention. Nobody who talks about it ever does it. Here's what you do say. Do you have a plan? If they have a plan, what is your plan? If the plan is detailed, time, place, method, you need to get them on the phone with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or if it's a younger person, they now have a text line because younger people tend to be more forthcoming in text. You text the word help to 741-741. If the person will not pick up the phone, you pick up the phone, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The volunteer will do what they can to talk the phone into the hand of the person who is in crisis. Question always comes up, when do you call the cops? If they're in immediate danger to themselves or others, you have to call 911. Now, knowing that may buy them what's called an IDO, involuntary detention order. They'll go in front of a judge. The judge will determine whether they should be locked down for 3 days in a lovely mental health gated community with no shoestrings or socks, no shoestrings or belt. And they're going to be mad if you do that, but they'll be alive. They're going to unfriend you on Facebook, but they'll be alive. So that's basic. That's sort of the, mental health 101. How do you spot depression? How do you spot thoughts of suicide? The good news is 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal cause are ambivalent. 8 out of 10. 9 out of 10 in the last week before the attempt will give you hints: verbal, nonverbal, behavioral, direct, indirect. And I believe I heard, don't you have that clip of Robin Williams from the?
I do. If you want to go there right now.
Yeah, that was it, because I mentioned the show because Robin, I worked with him a couple of times at the Comedy Store in La Jolla, in San Diego. Darling guy, not manic off stage whatsoever, just an ordinary guy. But he never admitted he was, I believe, bipolar, living with bipolar, or depressed and suicidal. He joked at length on his addiction treatment and recovery. And I believe the reason he didn't talk about his mental illness is because in LA, if you're going to make a movie or wherever you're going to make a movie, the production company buys, you probably know this, a life insurance policy on the stars, so that if you die of any cause during production, the production company recovers their costs. Well, if you tell your life insurance agent that you believe you're living with bipolar and you have thoughts of suicide, you may not get that life insurance policy, so you are not making a movie. So that may have been why he was reticent. Now, in the Terry Gross interview, do you have the clip that I mentioned where he?
I do. Let's go to that, because I scoured YouTube trying to find specific clips where he would talk about it, and the only thing we could find from our research was this clip from NPR.
Have you ever dealt with depressions? And I guess I'm wondering if
as a human being, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering if
your
manic side has.
It's not even manic. I mean, manic. That people sometimes I volunteered to be on the cover of I think it was Newsweek for their issue on medication. Thank you. And when the guy said, "Well, do you ever get depressed?" I said, "Yeah, sometimes I get sad." I mean, you can't watch news for more than 3 seconds and go, "Oh, this is depressing," and then immediately all of a sudden they branded me manic depressive. I was like, "That's clinical. I'm not that." Do I perform sometimes in a manic style? Yes. Am I manic all the time? No. Do I get sad? Oh, yeah. Does it hit me hard? Oh, yeah. Do you find a way? But does that immediately make me like, oh, good. Thanks, Terry. Nice talking with you. Oh, I don't know, Terry. I don't know. I don't get, I'm okay. I'm okay. Give me that. Can I borrow that? All right. Thanks for asking that, Terry, because, yeah, I get depressed. I get depressed that I wasn't on American Idol. I could sing,
So no clinical depression is what I'm taking away.
No
from
clinical
this.
depression. No. Am I? No. I'm. I get bummed, like I think a lot of us do at certain times. You look at the world and go, "Whoa," and then other moments you look and go, "Oh, things are okay." Oh, whoa.
And it totally makes sense what you're saying now. He knows in that situation he's uninsurable.
Yes, and later in the interview, somewhere in there, he says this line: "Life is not for everybody." Was that a hint that he was thinking about ending his life? And he said, I get sad. Watch the news, you get sad. There's a difference between getting sad watching the news, getting depressed because of the pandemic, and being clinically depressed. I've been most depressed and most suicidal at some of the best times in my life. I mean, things going good, money in the bank, mortgage paid off, lots of bookings on the calendar, and just wretchedly depressed. So for a lot of us, because I live with what's called generational depression and suicide, it runs in my family. For a lot of us, it's not situational. A situation like a bankruptcy can trigger it, but it's not. The news is sad. That's the neuronormal people, neurotypical, I imagine, get sad and anxious and perhaps slightly depressed because of the news, especially now. My wife pretty much stopped listening to the news because it was just, so depressing and so sad and made her so anxious. But what I have and what my tribe has, it's generally not situational, not transitory. It's just a way of life.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, generational, because I know when I came out, and I never thought I'd come out, right? I had not used that term. So when I came out and shared my story, I was very, very apprehensive to tell my children, because at the time when this happened, they were 8 and 12. And you're not in a frame of mind, because my then wife at the time said, well, obviously you weren't thinking. Hello, when I didn't pass away, she said, well, you obviously weren't thinking about your kids. Had you been thinking about your kids, you wouldn't have done it. And I need to just assure people here, it doesn't make sense. So don't try to make sense to say, well, wouldn't your last thoughts be about your children? You're not thinking about your children. You're not in your right mind. You're elsewhere. So don't try to make it make sense. But I was afraid to tell them about it. And they only loved me more. And it was actually a pretty bonding moment. So if it's something you're dealing with or have dealt with, I know it's difficult to be vulnerable. I'm going to share something with you. This is in one of your TED Talks, and you can set this up. This is that suicide note.
Oh, yeah, grandmother.
So let me play the clip, and then you can talk about it on the other side.
My dear children, I am so sorry to leave you, but it can't be helped. All summer long, I have been going downhill. Doctors have done all they could, but in spite of them, my nerves have gone completely shot. I can't sleep, I can't eat, and my mind is sadly unbalanced. Under such conditions, life is absolutely unlivable. Be good and meet me in the glory land. Heavenly Father understands. He has forgiven me, and I know you will too. Always my best love. Mother.
Tell us more about that situation.
My mother could not reach my grandmother on the phone, knew she was having difficulty. So she went over to the house, and my grandmother had pretty much taken care of everything, except back in the day, the milkman used to deliver milk, put it on your doorstep. And the milk was spoiling. But that's the only thing my grandmother overlooked. She had written checks for the bills, addressed the envelopes, put stamps on them, put them on the kitchen counter. She had pinned her will to her housecoat so my mother could find it without having to look. She closed all the windows and doors. She blew out the pilot light on the old gas stove. She sat down at the kitchen table and she wrote that note. And to your point about, weren't you thinking of your children when you did it? There's another misconception, I believe. People say it's a selfish act. Well, it's irrational, but it's not a selfish act generally in the mind of the person who is about to end their life. The three-legged stool of suicide, one is social isolation, you withdraw. Two is you have crossed the barrier mentally that you are willing to take your life. As you're born, infants have an amazing will to live, to survive. But you've crossed that barrier, you know you can do it. That's two. And three is a sense of burdensomeness. Many, many people who die by suicide believe, irrational though it may be, that the world would be better off without them. So, in fact, they do think of the people they leave behind, and they think they are doing them a favor. My wife would be brokenhearted, but she would not have been broke. She would have been restored financially with $1 million. So, yeah, but to people on the outside looking in, to people who've lost someone, the lost survivor, it does seem like a terribly selfish act. But irrational though it may be, that burdensomeness is the third leg of that stool. The world would be better off without me.
That totally makes sense. And I think from my own experience, that's where you go, right? They would be better off if that were to happen.
And my grandmother, she was widowed on the eve of the Depression. She had 3 kids. She had to get them through the Depression and herself. She did. She saw them all graduate high school. She saw them all go to college. She saw them all get married. And I believe she believed her job was done, that she was leaving no collateral damage. And so that's why she chose time, place, and method to end her life. She had done her job as a mother. And then my great aunt followed several years later. My great aunt I think she had glaucoma. And my mother was setting up a granny flat, mother-in-law flat, or granny flat at our house for this aunt. But the aunt did not want to be a burden to anyone. So she believed she was going to be a burden to our family. irrational because we were looking forward to having her. But in her mind, she was doing us a favor by dying by suicide.
And you found her.
Yeah, it's ugly. I was 4 years old. I mean, I can tell the story. I should give your viewers or listeners a trigger alert, trigger warning. It was gruesome. So if you are easily triggered by the discussion of suicide, you might want to tune out for about 45 seconds and then come back. Same situation. My mother couldn't reach my great aunt. She bundled me into the car. We drove over. It was a duplex. We let ourselves into her apartment. I was 4 years old. I'm holding on to my mother's coattails. We go through the apartment, nothing out of place except in the kitchen. When we got there, my mother noticed that all the stuff that should have been in the old lock-type refrigerator, not a magnetic seal, but a lock-type refrigerator, all that was on the counter: milk, butter, eggs, cheese. She did not realize what had happened. So she goes over to the refrigerator. I'm still holding on to her skirt tails. And she swings open the refrigerator door. Well, my aunt had decided to end her life. She crawled into the refrigerator because it was Loctite. Once she got the door closed, there was no getting out. She changed her mind at some point and tried to claw her way out. So you can imagine the scene. And when my mother opened the door, my great aunt fell on top of me and pinned me to the floor. And probably her face froze in that last moment of horror. So that's why I screamed 4 days, and I compartmentalized it. I blocked it out. And the family legend was, if I ever asked about it, they were to tell me that when my mother opened the door, my great aunt was sitting in there serenely with her hands folded in prayer. And about, it was 2020, about 8 years ago, I was at my cousin's restaurant in Raleigh, and I retold the story about the hands folded in prayer. And he said, "Oh, yeah, who told you that?" He's 10 years older. "Who told you that? The old bat fell out on you." And it all came rushing back. Yeah, it's, and if you are already hardwired for depression, thoughts of suicide, and you're that close to an actual suicide, it ups the chances at some point in your life you will seriously consider taking your life.
Well, I talked about how my mission is to help people not die hopeless and alone. This has become your mission too. Everything that I've seen about you, I mean, your website specifically is, let's bring that up so people can go there and find out more information, but your whole brand is built around this. Has that hindered your profession?
No, I started in comedy. Actually, I started out of college in insurance. And we had all the well-known motivational speakers come through San Diego, Zig Ziglar and those guys. And I would sit in the audience thinking I could do that. I could absolutely do what Zig Ziglar was doing if I just had something to teach somebody. So for decades, I cast about for a way to make a living speaking, doing comedy, and make a difference. And after my close call, I read a book by a woman named Judy Carter. She'd been a comic magician, then a comic, and then a public speaker. The book is called The Message of You, Turning Your Life into a Money-Making Speaking Career. Basically going from a funny speaker to a speaker who's funny. And I went into the book class thinking I had nothing. And she walks you through finding your heart story, she calls it. The story that makes your heart sing, makes the hair on your arm stand up, your passion. And halfway through, I thought, oh my God, I do have something to talk about. And I used her book to create my first TEDx. And in the creation of that, I discovered, even though one person dies by suicide in the US, an average of once every 11 minutes, nobody talks about it. Nobody talks out loud about depression and suicide unless you bring it up. And then almost everybody's got a story. And that led me to believe there was a market for me to get up on stage, share my story, and you said it, and be vulnerable. I just read Brene Brown's book on vulnerability because all my speaker friends, you got to read Brene Brown. I thought, how good could she be? So I get the Audible, I'm listening to it. And I mean, I had chills over and over because my superpower is vulnerability. I get up on stage as a man, tell my story, I shed a tear or two, and I start the conversation on suicide. That's my job, is to give permission to people to give voice to their experiences and their feelings surrounding depression and thoughts of suicide without recrimination. All my clients say to me, Frank, we brought you in simply to start the conversation on suicide. Because if you bring it up, almost everybody's got a story about themselves, about a loved one, a friend. So that's what and it is obviously my passion and my purpose. I believe it's say in speaking business, you need to pick a lane. Don't be a generalist. Find your niche.
Right.
And so I niched myself on January 1st, 2018 simply as a suicide prevention speaker. And then I went looking for markets where people wanted to hear that. And I looked at the top 10 occupations at risk for suicide, and 5 of them are actively seeking to do something about it. And I started with dentists, then went to veterinarians, physicians or healthcare. Construction is the number 1 at-risk occupation for suicide, and project managers, because project managers often work in construction over the entire project. And so those are my 5 target markets. I've got some other markets that chiropractors have a high rate, first responders, but those 5 all have a high rate of suicide, all trying to do something about it. So I niched into suicide prevention and mental illness, then I niched again into those 5 occupations. And that's, if you go to Suicide Prevention Speakers Dental on Google, you will find that I have somewhere between 5 and 8 organic listings on page 1 of Google, because I market, I want to be page 1, all those occupations, so people can find me. I did one in Chicago, the last gig I did before the COVID shut it down, for osteopaths. A woman, I said, how'd you find me? She goes, Frank, you're not going to believe this, but I typed in Suicide Prevention Speakers Osteopath, and you came up.
Wow.
That's because keyword. Those are my keywords. So, I go to bed thinking about it. I wake up thinking about it. And as I mentioned, people come up after the presentation. Oftentimes they've got chronic suicidal ideation. And I feel like I maybe steered them just far enough off the path of suicide, they're going to live a normal life. And then one evening in Billings, Montana, after a college show, standing outside, it's dusk, it's starting to snow. I can hear a river in the distance. I'm waiting for the kid to come pick me up in the pickup truck. And I started thinking about all those people that came up afterwards. And then maybe I steered them just far enough off the path of suicide. And it hit me, guys. I am like that character, George Bailey, in It's a Wonderful Life. I have seen what people's lives would be like if I were not there to speak and let them know they're not alone. And so the second thought was, I cannot kill myself now, because if I did, I would take each and every one of those people with me.
Because you're the one who helped them find hope.
Yeah, to let them know simply, not splitting the atom on mental health, but just let them know, hey, you're not alone. Yeah, the whole thing, I teach a curriculum called QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer. And it's not therapy. All it is teaching people how to spot the signs and symptoms of depression, thoughts of suicide, and planting seeds of hope. Suicide is the most preventable cause of death in the country, in the world. And you don't have to be a clinician to save somebody. Anybody can save someone if you know what to look for and you're willing to step outside your comfort zone and, intervene, ask the tough questions.
So just like the person who's going through that needs to be vulnerable, if there's people in their world, those people need to be courageous, because it is a difficult thing to talk about. And I love what it says on your Facebook as part of your descriptions is a stigma fighter. And I've never seen it that way. And I'm not going to say I'm going to totally adopt that, but I loved how that just made me feel of, yes, we're fighting a stigma here, because the story that you tell in one of your TED Talks about the Lido buffet and the doctor you met there, and if you choose to share that in a minute, please do. Yeah. But there is just, people are this close to the discussion, always that close to the discussion. And it's amazing how quickly someone will go there when given an opportunity. But it's almost like a piece of plexiglass. It holds us back from having good conversations. And then once we break through that, then it opens up the dialogue. Share with us that story that you shared about the doctor that you met at the Lido buffet.
Yep. And what she said actually gave me the idea worth spreading, the overall idea for that first TED Talk, and I'll save that for the end of the story. I'm in a Lido buffet. I did a show the night before. It's a C day, so the buffet's packed because there's nowhere to go except on the ship. Couldn't find a seat. Saw a woman, table for two, empty chair. So I point, she nods, I sit. She looks up, she goes, "Hey, are you the comedian?" I said, "Hey, did you enjoy the comedy show?" She goes, "I did." I said, "Then I'm the comedian." She laughed. She goes, "What would you have said if I told you I hated it?" They tell me I look a lot like him. She said, and I get this question all the time, "Is cruise comedy all you do?" I said, "No, I'm a public speaker. And I got to tell you, don't mind me bragging a bit, just nailed down my first TED Talk." She said, "I love the TED Talks. What's the topic?" Well, because I'd had this conversation many times. I thought I knew what was coming. So I said to her, depression and suicide, and started a countdown in my head. 3, 2, 1. She says, "I tried to kill myself twice." Now, she's seen me on stage, but this is the first time we have met. It's almost as if she was waiting for somebody to utter those words to give voice. She said, first time in college, not so serious, kind of half-hearted. Second time, far more serious. I graduated college. I had graduated medical school. I had the knowledge. I had the equipment. I had the IV started in my ankle. Suicide cocktail one hand, syringe in the other, getting ready to load it up, and the phone rings. So should I pick it up, she thinks? Well, I better, because it might be somebody who'd worry and come right over and interrupt. Picks up the phone, her 13-year-old son. She said, "I don't know if he heard something in my voice or had a premonition, but he simply said, 'Mom, don't do anything.'" She said, "So I didn't. I didn't give up on the idea of suicide, but I decided not to do it that day because I knew he would always feel guilty. Wasn't there something he could say or do to keep me from taking my own life?" And we've talked about there are things you can say, there are things you can do to make that happen, because 8 out of 10 people are ambivalent. I said, "Well, how old is he now?" She said, "He's 21. I said, "Does he know his phone call saved your life?" This became the theme of my TED Talk. She said, "No. How do you start that conversation?" And I thought, oh, I know how to start. I'll do a TED Talk. And that was the theme of my TED Talk. Starting the conversation on suicide. That's going to be the name of my book. Starting the conversation on suicide, living in the exit road. So that's my job. That's really all I'm there for, is to get up on stage and be vulnerable and then hang around afterwards for those people who come up. Brene Brown said this. I've said it in a variety of ways, but she said it best. This is how I feel about that time after the show, when people come up and they've got issues, problems. She says, "I am so comfortable in my dark, I can sit comfortably with you in yours."
That's powerful, because everyone has their dark, and I don't want to say they're fooling themselves if they won't admit it, but we all experience times of darkness and light.
Well, that brings us back to the pandemic, because I'm guessing there are going to be more suicides. There's already more domestic abuse and child abuse. And I believe there may have already been more than the average number of suicides because of the pandemic, people waking up in an uncertain world every morning. The irony is, I've done podcast after podcast, webinar, radio interview on how to survive. It's called Social Distancing and Staying Sane. It turns out that being mentally ill and waking up every morning in an uncertain world, you develop what they call a self-care plan. You have to figure out a way so that you can put your feet on the floor in the morning and then put one foot in front of the other all day long until it's socially acceptable time to go back to bed. So you develop a self-care plan. For me, it's diet, exercise, good night's sleep, meditation, and medication. And then I teach them about control the things you can control. Go to bed at the same time every night, set your alarm and get up, even though you don't have to go to work per se. Schedule your meals, schedule your binge watching Ozark on Netflix, schedule your workouts. You've got to take control of things you can take control of. So there are those of us mentally ill. I've talked to several of my friends who've been joking about how well suited we are for this situation, because we wake up in an uncertain world every morning. So it's, but yeah, there is situational depression tied to the pandemic, and I'm afraid there will be additional suicides. And it's just unfortunately the nature of the beast.
Yeah, there will be many deaths of despair, for sure.
Well, and deaths of despair is in our book. We talk about that because 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide in the U.S. as of this moment are men. And most of them are age 45, 54, most of them Caucasian. And in large part, it's deaths of despair. People think all the jobs went overseas, manufacturing jobs went overseas. Only 12 to 15% of manufacturing jobs actually disappeared overseas. The balance have been taken by AI and robotics. So you've got a guy who's, let's say, 50 years old, high school education, maybe community college, trade school, had a good job at a manufacturing plant, good wages, blue collar, but middle class wages. And now his job is gone. And yeah, maybe they got a retraining program and he can do something else, but men tend to tie their egos to their jobs.
Yeah, it's their identity, right? It's
their identity. And so that it often results in a downward spiral, a death spiral into drugs and alcohol. And, so that's one of the reasons we wrote the book. One of my co-authors went to Barnes & Noble to find a book on men's mental health and couldn't find one. Went to Amazon, couldn't find one. So we wrote one. It's actually, going to be 4 volumes. We started to write one book. It got to be 1,000 pages. So each volume has it's an anthology, 12 stories, 12 men. First 500 words, things are great. Second 500 words, things go bad. Third 500 words, here's how I'm coping. Because the men we surveyed, we said, in what form do you want help? And they said, look, we want the hero's journey. We want stories of men, by men, for men. Tell me how another guy is dealing with bankruptcy, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, divorce. That's what they wanted. So that, and it's wrapped around that are exercises and clinical information, suggestions, and humor. The 2 ladies approached me and said, would you add the car metaphors, because it looks like a car owner's manual, and would you add the humor? And I said, wait a minute, ladies, you're writing a book on men's mental health? Don't you think you might need, I don't know, a man? They go, man. So I said, look, you made me a co-author. You let me voice the books for Audible, and I'll make it funny, and I'll add the car metaphors. There's a lot of brain car metaphors, about schedule maintenance and having to, plan if it breaks down, like joining AAA, and you need your own pit crew for your mental health. And so there's a lot of car brain metaphors. There are funnies throughout the book to make it more readable. And you know what, Cos? It's not the kind of book you read cover to cover. It's more like one of those old Haynes automobile repair manuals. If your carburetor goes bad, you're not going to read the entire car repair manual. What are you going to do? You're going to turn to the index, find carburetors, go to that chapter, read the chapter, fix the carburetor. That's kind of what we're after. Go to a chapter of a guy who had an alcohol addiction or a substance use disorder. If that's what you have, you see how he's handling it. So, and we think it's going to be a big seller among women who have a man in their life. They want desperately to help but have no idea how.
So the book is available on Amazon as a paper book, and it's also a Kindle. It's also on Audible, but you made a generous offer that our viewers and listeners can actually download a copy of the audio from your website.
Yes, an MP3 of the unabridged audio for nothing. Just give me an email address and you can download the MP3. And I had a ball voicing it. I actually, several times in the book, when I'm reading the guys' stories, because they're told in first person by the guys, I actually get choked up, but I left that in. I wanted them to hear the emotion in my voice as I said those words. That's that vulnerability again.
Oh, that is so hard. I had a coworker, I talked about this a few weeks ago on an episode. I had a cohort that said, I could never be vulnerable. And I agree. He was just always so stoic. I mean, talk about steady Eddie. But there had to be storms going on in that guy's life. But you wouldn't know extreme joy, and you certainly wouldn't know any pain. And I am completely the opposite of that, for sure. It's tough for people to be vulnerable because they're struggling with the I am enough anyway. That if they then verbalize they're not enough and they're having struggles, that seems to in their mind just admit defeat and weakness.
Well, and it's called male toxicity or masculine toxicity. Big boys are taught not to cry, not to show emotions, not to reach out for help. And you know what, Kaz? It's not just mental. Men tend to wait too long for their colonoscopy or take the PSA test, or if they got chest pains, they're sure it's a burrito. They're not going to go see the cardiologist. There's a reason women live longer than men, and I believe that's one of them right there. You cannot admit the weakness. When I had a biopsy on my prostate because the PSA number ticked up a bit. When the doctor called to my wife to tell her the results of the biopsy, he was practically giddy, and because it was benign. And I said, you know why he's giddy? I bet you it's the rare phone call he gets to make to the wife of a man and tell her that the biopsy on the prostate was benign. Because men put it off until they got back pain or that's generally what happens. They got pain in their lower back, and they go in and find out the cancer spread to the spine. Men just are hardwired, a lot of us, not to show that kind of weakness, not to reach out. So that's the point of the book, and that's the point of what I do. I want to give men and women cover. You can, now that you've heard my story and seen me being vulnerable, you can come out and share that with your loved ones, because there's a power in sharing it. It's much easier on me now that my wife knows, because she had no idea. She's about to hit play on my first TED Talk. I said, stop. Let me tell you half a dozen things you're going to hear on there that you have no idea about. Nobody knew I was depressed and suicidal. I have a Screen Actors Guild card for a reason. I'm a great actor. Many people with mental illness are. Paste on that smile, walk through the world like nothing is wrong.
Well, thank you for your courage, your vulnerability, and your mission for helping people have hope, not be alone.
That's it. It's all about planting the seeds. Because to me, people ask, what's depression like? To me, it is a hopelessness. Why bother? So we need to plant a seed of hope and give them a reason. And by the way, remember we talked about, are you having thoughts of suicide? Do you have a plan? What is your plan? I've added 2 questions when I talk to people. I flat out ask them, okay, are you going to kill yourself? And if they say no, last question, I believe the most important cause, well, then tell me why not. Make them give voice. And you've heard mine. I feel like I'm George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life. And if I killed myself, I would take all those people who would never get a chance to hear me and realize they're not alone with me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And just for those that have just tuned in, tell us how to get that MP3 download of your book.
If you go to or as we say down south, guys, the mentalhealthcomedian.com, and a little thing will pop up and say, hey, do you want an MP3 audiobook unabridged of the Guts, Grit, and the Grind? Put in your email address, and you'll get a link to download the entire thing. And I don't know about you guys, but I haven't read a book in forever. I've listened to a goodly number. So I had to drag my co-authors kicking and screaming into doing an audiobook. I said, you don't understand. I mean, people a lot of times nowadays don't read anything. We got to have an audiobook.
I completely understand. I'm an Audible narrator, so I've got
really
a personal mission around just audio and podcasting and audiobooks. We're consuming it wherever we go, and just what we're doing with podcasts and audiobooks is amazing. So thank you for putting that in audio format. And you can tell your co-authors, from a guy who believes in audiobooks, I'm so grateful that you did.
Well, and when if your listeners or viewers have heard us talking today, and you go to listen to the audiobook, I don't know about you guys, but I've got an amazing editor who masters it for Audible. And the first time I heard what he did with my voice, I'm like, damn, I am good.
It's amazing. The magic of Hollywood.
Oh, man. No lip smacks, no breaths, no pauses. It's just amazing.
It's awesome. Again, thank you very much for your mission and being here today, and especially under these circumstances of Wendy being in surgery and you just having those personal exigent circumstances and just in this little window, you found time to talk to us. So thank you very much. And all of our viewers and listeners, thank you as well. God bless you, and take good care of your wife. Thank you very
Well,
much.
You are welcome, and I'd love to repost this on my social media if that's possible. I like to share these sorts of things.
Absolutely. I'll definitely tag you in that and share this with your audience as well.
Sweet.
Frank, have a wonderful day and stay the course.
Yes. Oh yeah. Now I can't kill myself.
No. And for anybody watching that's just having, thoughts or that needs somebody, I've always made this invitation. You can always reach out to me, and I'm all over social media, so you can get a hold of me very easily. I'm always here to listen. I may not have all the answers. I'm not necessarily trained, but we can start with an ear and find the resources to help. So,
and my phone number is on my website, guys. And I tell people, look, just pick up the phone, give me a call, and don't worry about waking me up because I turn that thing off at night. I'll call you when I wake up in the morning. You're not going to wake me.
I was, you gave me your phone number, but I did not know that was the offer. I would have put it up there. So, they're so inclined, they can go to your website and find it.
It's right there.
Thank you for that offer. Have a great day. Bye-bye.